In the icy shadows of a January dawn, a desperate cry pierces the silence of 2-1B Baker Street, summoning Sherlock Holmes to the grim scene of a brutal murder at the Abbey Grange. Sir Eustace Brackenstall lies dead, his skull shattered by a poker, his wife bound and bruised, whispering of 3 masked intruders. But as Holmes unravels, the clues a sailor's knot, a pearl earring, an untouched glass of claret, the truth slinks deeper into a web of deception. Was it a burglary gone wrong, or a darker secret hidden within the manor's walls? As the snow falls, a sailor's shadowed past and a lady's desperate lie lead Holmes to a choice that defies the law itself. Will justice prevail, or will the truth vanish into the frost forever unsolved? Chapter 1. A Call in the Cold. It was a raw and biting morning in January 1897, when the frost clung to the windows of 2-1B Baker Street like a shroud, casting intricate patterns of ice that gleamed faintly in the pallid light of dawn. The air within our modest lodgings was scarcely warmer, for the fire in the grate had dwindled to a few sullen embers, and the chill seemed to seep through the very walls. I, Dr. John H. Watson, had been roused from a fitful slumber by the insistent clamour of the bell, its sharp peal cutting through the stillness of the hour. My friend and companion, Sherlock Holmes, was already awake, his lean silhouette framed against the hearth as he coaxed life into the dying coals with a poker. His dressing gown hung loosely about his angular frame, and his eyes, ever alert, gleamed with that peculiar intensity which betokened the stirring of his remarkable faculties. "A client, Watson," said he, without turning from his task, his voice as crisp as the frost outside. "At such an hour, it can only be a matter of grave import. No man seeks Sherlock Holmes before breakfast unless driven by necessity." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and drew my dressing gown tighter against the cold. "Who could it be?" I asked, my breath visible in the frigid air. "Mrs. Hudson will not be pleased to be disturbed so early." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Mrs. Hudson's displeasure is a small price to pay for the unraveling of a mystery. Mark my words, Watson, this is no trivial errand, scarcely." Had he spoken when the door opened, and our landlady, her face a study in resigned indignation, ushered in a man whose appearance confirmed Holmes's prediction. Inspector Stanley Hopkins of Scotland Yard stood before us, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his face flushed with more than the cold. His overcoat was dusted with snow, and his hat, clutched tightly in his gloved hands, bore the marks of a hurried journey. His eyes, usually steady, darted with an agitation I had seldom seen in the young officer. "Mr. Holmes," he began, his voice betraying a tremor of urgency, "I apologize for the hour, but I am at my wit's end. There's been a murder at the Abbey Grange, near Chislehurst, a brutal affair. Sir Eustace Brackenstall is dead, struck down in his own home. The circumstances are perplexing, and I need your insight." Holmes's eyes narrowed, and he gestured to the armchair by the fire. "Sit, Hopkins, and warm yourself. Watson, be so good as to stoke the fire. Now, Inspector, tell me everything, every detail, however small. The truth often lies in what others deem insignificant." Hopkins sank into the chair, his hands clasped tightly before him, and began his tale. "The Abbey Grange," he explained, "was a stately manor in the Kentish countryside, home to Sir Eustace Brackenstall, a man of considerable wealth and an unenviable reputation for a fiery temper. The previous night, shortly after midnight, Sir Eustace had been found dead in the dining room, his skull shattered by a heavy blow from a poker. His wife, Lady Mary Brackenstall, had been discovered bound to a chair, her face marked by a livid bruise, her wrists chafed by coarse rope. She claimed to have been overpowered by 3 intruders burglars, it seemed, who had fled with a silver candlestick and several pieces of plate. A bottle of wine, half empty, stood upon the table, flanked by 3 glasses, their rims stained with the residue of drink. The Randall gang, Hopkins declared with conviction. They've been terrorizing the county for months, 3 men. Always 3, striking at night and leaving chaos in their wake. This fits their methods precisely. Holmes leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his gaze fixed upon the ceiling as though the answers to the mystery were etched among the shadows. 3 glasses, he murmured, almost to himself, and the lady's injuries described them in detail. Hopkins. The inspector hesitated, as if his thoughts. Lady Brackenstall had a bruise across her left cheek, vivid and fresh, as though struck with some force. Her wrists bore marks of rope, red and raw, where she had struggled against her bonds. She was shaken, naturally, but remarkably composed for a woman who had witnessed her husband's murder. Holmes's expression remained impassive, but I knew. That mind of his was already at work, sifting through the facts with the precision of a chemist analyzing a compound. The rope, said he, was it from the house, or brought by the intruders? Hopkins frowned. Lady Brackenstall said it was cut from the bell pull in the dining room. The end was frayed, as though severed with a knife. Holmes nodded slowly, and the wind did the burglars pause to drink amidst their crime. So it seems, Hopkins replied. The bottle was half drunk, and the glasses were used. It's odd, I grant you, but the Randall gang is known for their audacity. Holmes's eyes flickered with a spark of interest. Audacity, indeed. Tell me, Hopkins, what of Sir Eustace himself? Was he a man likely to provoke such violence? Hopkins shifted uncomfortably. Sir Eustace was not well liked. He had a reputation for harshness, both in business and at home. There were rumors of quarrels with his wife, though nothing proven. The servants speak of his temper, but they're loyal to Lady Brackenstall and say little. Holmes rose abruptly, his movements swift and purposeful. We must see the scene ourselves. Hopkins. Watson, dress warmly. The Kentish air will be unkind today. We shall take the next train to Chislehurst. Within the hour, we were aboard a train rattling through the frost-bound countryside, the fields stretching away in a monochrome expanse of white and grey. Holmes sat opposite me, his pipe unlit, his gaze fixed on the passing landscape. Hopkins, beside him, fidgeted with his notebook, occasionally glancing at Holmes as if hoping to divine his thoughts. Watson, Holmes said at length, breaking the silence, what strikes you about this case thus far? I considered the question, my mind still heavy with the morning's chill. The brutality of the attack is notable, I ventured. To bludgeon a man with a poker suggests a personal animus, not merely the work of thieves. And the 3 glasses, why would burglars linger to drink? Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. Well said, Watson. The glasses are a puzzle, are they not? 3 men, 3 glasses. Yet the act of drinking implies a pause, a moment of leisure in the midst of flight. It is incongruous, and the ladies, composure most women, having seen their husbands slain, would be prostrate with grief, yet Hopkins describes her as composed. Curious, is it not? Hopkins looked up sharply. You suspect Lady Brackenstall? Holmes waved a hand dismissively. I suspect nothing, Hopkins, until the facts speak for themselves. But I observe, and what I observe is seldom without meaning. The train deposited us at Chislehurst station, where a four-wheeler awaited to carry us to the Abbey Grange. The manor loomed against the winter sky, its grey stone façade austere and unwelcoming. Ivy clung to its walls, brittle and brown, and the windows stared down like sightless eyes. As we approached, a constable stationed at the gate saluted Hopkins, and led us through the snow-dusted grounds to the heavy oak door inside. The air was scarcely warmer than without, the vast hall echoing with our footsteps. A maid, pale and nervous, took our coats, and Hopkins led us to the dining room where the tragedy had unfolded. The room was grand, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow us as we entered. The table, a massive slab of oak, bore the remnants of the crime. The poker, its handle dark with dried blood, the half-empty bottle of wine, and the three glasses, their contents undisturbed since the night before. Holmes moved with the precision of a bloodhound, his lens in hand, his eyes darting from the table to the floor, the windows, the walls. He knelt by the hearth, where a smear of blood marked the stone, and examined it closely. "The blow was struck here," said he, his voice low. "The angle suggests a man of some height, striking downward with force. Sir Eustace was tall, was he not?" "Over 6 feet," Hopkins confirmed. "A powerful man, but no match for a poker in the hands of a determined assailant." Holmes rose and crossed to the window, where the heavy curtains hung slightly askew. He parted them, revealing a sill dusted with frost, and leaned out to inspect the ground below. "Footprints," he said, pointing to faint impressions in the snow. "3 sets, as you said, Hopkins. 2 heavy, 1 lighter. They lead toward the lake at the edge of the estate." Hopkins nodded eagerly. "The Randall gang, no doubt. They fled across the grounds, likely to a waiting cart." Holmes's expression was unreadable. "Perhaps," said he, his tone non-committal. He turned back to the room and approached the chair where Lady Brackenstall had been found. The rope, coarse and frayed, still hung from its arms, and Holmes examined it with care, his fingers tracing the knots. "A sailor's knot," he murmured, "not the work of a common thief." I exchanged a glance with Hopkins, who looked puzzled. "A sailor?" he asked. "What has a sailor to do with this?" Holmes did not answer, but continued his inspection, his movements swift and methodical. He paused by the table, lifting one of the glasses to the light. "This glass," said he, "is cleaner than the others. The wine within it is untouched, as though poured but not drunk. Curious." Hopkins frowned. "What does it mean, Mr. Holmes?" "It means," said Holmes, setting the glass down, "that we must speak with Lady Brackenstall. Her account is the cornerstone of this case, and I wish to hear it from her own lips." We were shown to the drawing room, where Lady Mary Brackenstall awaited us. She was a woman of striking beauty, her auburn hair swept up in a manner that accentuated the delicate lines of her face, yet the bruise upon her cheek, vivid against her pale skin, told a story of violence, and her eyes, though clear, held a shadow of fear. She rose as we entered, her movements graceful but guarded. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice low and steady, "Inspector Hopkins tells me you are here to help." "I am grateful." Holmes inclined his head. "I am here to seek the truth, Lady Brackenstall. Pray, recount the events of last night, and spare no detail." She seated herself, her hands folded tightly in her lap, and began. "I was awakened by a noise footsteps, I think, in the hall. I rose and went to the dining room, where I found Sir Eustace. Before I could speak, 3 men burst in through the window. They were rough, their faces masked. Sir Eustace confronted them, but one struck him with the poker. I screamed, and they seized me, binding me to the chair. They took a candlestick and some plate, poured wine, and then fled. It was all so sudden I can scarcely recall more. Holmes listened in silence, his eyes never leaving her face. "The rope," said he, "was it cut from the bell pull?" She nodded, a flicker of hesitation crossing her features. "Yes, I believe so. It was lying on the floor when I awoke." "And the wine?" Holmes continued. "Did you see them drink?" "They poured it," she said faintly. "I was dazed, but I saw them take the glasses." Holmes's gaze lingered upon her, and I sensed that he was weighing her words with care. "Thank you, Lady Brackenstall," said he at last. "Your account is most helpful. We shall trouble you no further for now." As we left the drawing room, Holmes's expression was grave. "There is more here than meets the eye, Watson," he murmured. "The lady's tale is plausible, yet it lacks the ring of truth. The rope, the glasses, the bruised point to a narrative carefully constructed." Hopkins, overhearing, bristled. "You think she lies, Mr. Holmes?" "I think," said Holmes, "that we must look beyond the obvious. The Abbey Grange holds secrets, and I intend to uncover them." We stepped out into the grounds, where the snow lay thick upon the lawn. Holmes led us to the window of the dining room, where the footprints were still visible. He knelt, his lens glinting in the weak sunlight, and studied the marks with care. "2 men," said he, "and a third, lighter possibly a youth. But observe, Watson, the depth of the tracks. They are uneven, as though one man hesitated or lingered. He followed the prints to the edge of the frozen lake, where they grew muddled. Here they end," said he, pointing to a patch of disturbed snow. "The ice is thin, perhaps. They crossed and broke through, yet there is something else." He bent low and retrieved a small object from the snow, holding it up to the light. It was a pearl earring, its luster undimmed by the cold. Hopkins seized upon it a clue. The Randall gang must have dropped it in their flight. Holmes's smile was enigmatic. "Pearls are not the adornments of common burglars, Hopkins. This belongs to a lady of refinement. We shall see what it tells us." As we returned to the house, Holmes's mood was one of quiet determination. "The game is afoot, Watson," said he. "The Abbey Grange is a stage, and we have yet to meet all the players. But mark my words, before this day is out, we shall know more than we do now." And so began our investigation into the grim affair of the Abbey Grange, a case that would test not only Holmes's intellect, but his sense of justice in ways I could not yet foresee. Chapter 2. The scene of the crime, the journey to the Abbey Grange, had been one of sombre anticipation. The Kentish landscape passing in a blur of frost and shadow as our four-wheeler rattled along the frozen lanes. The air was sharp with the promise of more snow, and the sky hung low, its leaden hue mirroring the gravity of the task before us. Sherlock Holmes sat in silence, his sharp profile etched against the carriage window, his mind, no doubt, already dissecting the sparse facts Inspector Stanley Hopkins had provided. I, Dr. John H. Watson, found my thoughts drifting to the grim scene awaiting USA man struck down in his own home, his wife bound and bruised, and the spectre of a ruthless gang casting its shadow over the affair as we drew near the Abbey Grange. The manor emerged from the mist like a fortress of old, its grey stone walls rising stern and unyielding against the winter's chill. The grounds were cloaked in snow, broken only by the tracks of those who had come and gone since the tragedy. A constable, his breath clouding in the cold, stood sentinel at the gate, his salute to Hopkins a stark reminder of the official weight of our mission. We alighted, and the crunch of our boots upon the frozen path was the only sound save for the distant caw of a rook, its cry echoing across the desolate estate. Hopkins led us through the heavy oak door into a hall of imposing grandeur, its high ceiling lost in shadow and its walls adorned with tapestries that spoke of wealth and lineage. Yet there was a chill here that went beyond the January frost, a sense of disquiet that seemed to linger in the very air. A maid, her eyes red-rimmed, and her movements hesitant, took our coats, and we proceeded to the dining room where the crime had occurred. The room was vast, its long table dominating the center, flanked by chairs of dark oak. Portraits of stern forebears gazed down from the walls, their painted eyes seeming to judge the intrusion of death into their domain. The air held a faint, metallic temps, the residue of violence that no amount of airing could dispel. The scene was as Hopkins had described, yet its reality struck with a force that words could not convey. The poker, its handle dark with congealed blood, lay upon the table, a mute instrument of murder. Beside it stood a bottle of claret, its contents diminished by half, and 3 glasses, their rims stained with wine, arranged as if in mockery of a convivial gathering. A heavy chair stood askew, its arms still bound with coarse rope, the frayed ends dangling like the threads of an unfinished tale. The window, its latch forced, gaped open to the cold, and the curtains stirred faintly. In the draught, Holmes moved with the precision of a predator, his eyes sweeping the room with an intensity that missed nothing. He began at the hearth, where a smear of blood marked the flagstones, and crouched to examine it, his lens glinting in the dim light. "The blow was struck here," said he, his voice low and deliberate. "The spatter suggests a single, forceful strike delivered from above. Sir Eustace was tall, Hopkins over 6 feet, you said?" "Indeed," Hopkins replied, standing near the table, his notebook in hand. "A powerful man, but no match for a weapon wielded with intent." Holmes nodded and rose, crossing to the window. He leaned out, his gaze fixed upon the snow beyond. "The footprints are clear," he observed, pointing to 3 distinct sets leading from the window toward the lake at the edge of the estate. 2 are heavy, likely men of stout build. The third is lighter perhaps, a youth, or a man of slighter frame. But observe, Watson, the spacing. The heavier tracks are purposeful, direct. The lighter ones falter, as though their owner hesitated. I peered over his shoulder, noting the impressions in the snow. "Could it be fear?" I ventured. "A younger accomplice, less hardened to crime." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "A possibility, Watson. But hesitation in a burglar is a rare thing, especially one bold enough to drink wine in the midst of murder." He turned back to the room, his attention drawn to the rope upon the chair. He lifted it, his fingers tracing the coarse fibers, and his brow furrowed. "This knot," said he, "is a reef knot, commonly used by sailors. Not the sort one expects from a gang of land-bound thieves." Hopkins, who had been watching closely, frowned. "Sailors, Mr. Holmes. The Randall gang are no seafarers. They're London roughs, known for their brutality." "So you say," Holmes replied, his tone enigmatic. "Yet the evidence speaks its own language. Let us see what else it has to say." He moved to the table, lifting one of the glasses to the light. The wine within gleamed ruby red, but the rim was curiously clean compared to its companions. "This glass," said he, "was poured but not drunk. The others bear traces of lips, but this one is pristine." "Why?" Hopkins shrugged. "Perhaps one of the gang was interrupted before he could drink." Holmes's eyes gleamed with a spark of interest. "Interrupted, or never intended to drink at all?" "3 glasses, Hopkins, yet only 2 men drank. The third is a fiction, or a deception." He set the glass down and turned his attention to the bottle, sniffing its contents. "A fine claret, not the sort one expects burglars to savor. This was opened recently. Note the freshness of the cork." I felt a stir of excitement at his words, though the full import eluded me. "You suspect the scene was staged?" I asked. Holmes's gaze met mine, sharp and piercing. "I suspect nothing, Watson, until the facts compel me. But I observe, and what I observe suggests a narrative crafted with care." He crossed to the bell pull, a thick cord hanging near the fireplace, its end severed and frayed. "This is the source of the rope, I presume." Hopkins nodded. "Lady Brackenstall said the intruders cut it to bind her." Holmes examined the frayed end, his fingers lingering upon the fibers. "Cut with a knife, and not a sharp one," said he. "The tear is uneven, as though done in haste or meant to appear so." He straightened, his expression unreadable. "We must see the grounds, Hopkins. The footprints may tell us more than this room." We stepped out into the cold, the snow crunching beneath our boots as we followed the tracks from the window. The trail led across the lawn, winding through bare shrubs to the edge of a frozen lake that lay like a sheet of clouded glass at the boundary of the estate. Here, the footprints grew muddled, as though the intruders had paused or struggled. Holmes knelt, his lens sweeping over the snow, and his hand darted forward to retrieve a small object half buried in the drift. It was a pearl earring, its delicate luster catching the faint light. Hopkins seized upon it with a cry. "A clue, Mr. Holmes. The Randall gang must have dropped it in their flight. Perhaps stolen from Lady Brackenstall herself." Holmes held the earring to the light, his eyes narrowing. "A pearl of such quality is no trinket for a thief's pocket," said he. "It speaks of refinement, not robbery. We shall see to whom it belongs." He slipped it into his pocket and continued along the trail, his gaze fixed upon the ice. "The tracks end here," he said, pointing to a patch of disturbed snow at the lake's edge. "The ice is thin, perhaps one fell through, or they crossed and covered their path." Hopkins nodded eagerly. "That would explain why we've found no trace of them beyond the estate. The Randall gang is cunning." Holmes's smile was thin. "Cunning, indeed. But cunning men do not leave pearls behind, nor do they pause to drink fine wine. There is another hand at work here, Hopkins, and we must find it." We returned to the house, where Holmes requested to speak with the household staff. The maid, Teresa, a wiry woman with a face etched by years of service, met us in the servants' hall. Her eyes were sharp, her manner guarded, but she answered Holmes's questions with a directness that spoke of loyalty to her mistress. "Sir Eustace was a hard man," she said, when pressed about the household's mood. "He drank heavily last night and quarrelled with my lady. I heard raised voices, but I kept to my duties." Holmes's gaze was piercing. "And Lady Brackenstall, did she bear marks of his temper before this night?" Teresa's lips tightened, but she nodded. "She's a gentle soul, sir, and he was not always kind. I've seen bruises on her arms, though she'd never speak of it." Holmes thanked her and dismissed her, his expression grave as we stepped back into the hall. "The household is a tinderbox, Watson," he murmured. "Sir, Eustace's temper, Lady Brackenstall's bruises, the sailors not all pieces of a puzzle that does not yet fit the shape of a burglary." Hopkins, trailing behind, looked troubled. "You doubt the Randall gang's involvement, Mr. Holmes?" "I doubt nothing," Holmes replied, "but I question everything. The scene is too perfect. Hopkins, the rope, the glasses, the footprints. It is as though someone wished us to see a burglary and nothing more." As we prepared to leave the dining room, Holmes paused by the table once more, his fingers brushing the poker's handle. "This weapon," said he, "was not chosen at random. It is heavy, but not unwieldy. A man or woman with sufficient strength could wield it with deadly effect. We must learn more of Sir Eustace's enemies, Hopkins, and those within his own walls." The inspector nodded, though his expression betrayed uncertainty. "I'll have the constables search the grounds again and inquire in the village. The Randall gang may still be near." "Do so," said Holmes, "but look also. For a man who knows the sea, the knot tells its own tale, and I suspect it will lead us to the heart of this mystery." As we stepped back into the cold, the Abbey Grange loomed behind us, its secrets locked within its stone walls. Holmes's eyes gleamed with the fire of the chase, and I knew that the scene of the crime had only begun to yield its truths. The game, as he would say, was afoot, and the path to justice lay shrouded in the frost of that bleak January day. Chapter 3. The Abbey Grange. The Abbey Grange stood as a monument to both grandeur and gloom, its grey stone walls rising from the snow-clad Kentish earth, like the bones of some ancient giant. The winter sun, feeble and fleeting, did little to soften the manor's austere façade, and as we crossed the threshold, a chill seemed to settle deeper than the January frost. The events of the previous night hung over the house like a pall, and the servants who moved silently through the halls bore the strained expressions of those who had witnessed tragedy. Inspector Stanley Hopkins led the way, his stride purposeful, but his face etched with the unease of a man grappling with a puzzle beyond his grasp. Sherlock Holmes, however, was in his element, his keen eyes darting from the polished oak panelling to the high windows, as if the very walls might whisper their secrets to him. We were ushered into the drawing-room, a space of opulent contrast to the grim scene we had just left in the dining-room. The walls were hung with rich tapestries, their colours muted by time, and a fire roared in the grate, casting flickering shadows across a suite of velvet-upholstered furniture. Yet the warmth could not dispel the tension that clung to the air. Lady Mary Brackenstall awaited us, seated upon a chaise longue, her posture erect but her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was a woman of remarkable beauty, her auburn hair catching the firelight, her features delicate yet marred by a vivid bruise that spread across her left cheek like a cruel signature. Her eyes, a deep green, held a guarded intensity, and though she rose to greet us with a semblance of composure, there was a tremor in her movements that spoke of nerves stretched taut. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, Inspector Hopkins," she said, her voice low and measured, "I am grateful for your presence. This has been a terrible night, and I am at a loss to understand it." Holmes inclined his head, his expression one of studied neutrality. "We are here to bring clarity, Lady Brackenstall," said he, taking the chair opposite her. "Pray, recount the events of last night as you recall them. Every detail, however small, may be of consequence." She drew a breath, her gaze falling to the floor as if to steady herself. "I was awakened by a sound footsteps, perhaps, or the creak of a door. It was past midnight, and the house was still. I rose and went to the dining room, where I found my husband, Sir Eustace. He had been drinking, as he often did, and was in a foul temper. Before I could speak, the window shattered, and 3 men burst in. Their faces were covered scarves, I think, and they moved with purpose. Sir Eustace shouted at them, demanding they leave, but one raised the poker from the hearth and struck him. He fell, and I saw blood, so much blood. Her voice faltered, and she pressed a hand to her lips. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes fixed upon her with an intensity that seemed to pierce through her words. And then, he prompted gently, they turned on me, she continued, her voice steadying. One seized me, and I struggled, but they were too strong. They bound me to the chair with rope cut from the bell pull. I believe and struck me across the face when I cried out. They took a silver candlestick and some plate from the sideboard, poured wine from the bottle on the table, and then fled through the window. I heard their footsteps in the snow, fading toward the lake. I must have fainted, for the next I knew, Teresa, my maid, was loosening my bonds. Holmes's fingers steepled beneath his chin, his gaze never wavering. The rope, Lady Brackenstall, said he. Was it already in the dining room when the intruders entered? She hesitated, her brow creasing faintly. I think so. It was lying near the bell pull, as though they had cut it there. And the wine, Holmes continued, his tone deceptively casual. Did you see them drink, or merely pour it? Her eyes flickered, and she clasped her hands more tightly. They poured it, Mr. Holmes. I was dazed, but I saw them take the glasses. Whether they drank, I cannot say with certainty. Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. And your husband's temper, had he been quarrelsome that evening? Shadow crossed her face, and she looked away, toward the fire. Sir Eustace was often difficult after wine. We had words, but it was nothing unusual. He was not a gentle man. Holmes rose, his movements fluid and deliberate, and paced the room, his eyes sweeping over the furnishings as if seeking some hidden clue. Thank you, Lady Brackenstall, said he at last. Your account is most illuminating. We shall not detain you further for now. As we left the drawing room, Hopkins turned to Holmes, his brow furrowed. She seems truthful, Mr. Holmes. Her story aligns with the evidence, the rope, the glasses, the stolen silver. Holmes's smile was faint and enigmatic. Truth is a slippery thing, Hopkins. It wears many masks, and we have yet to see its true face. He led us back to the dining room, where the grim relics of the crime awaited. The poker, the glasses, the frayed rope stood as silent witnesses to the night's violence. Holmes knelt by the chair, examining the rope with his lens, his fingers tracing the knots with a precision that bordered on reverence. This knot, said he, rising, is a clove hitch, another sailor's knot, and expertly tied. It is not the work of a hurried burglar, but of one accustomed to the sea. He turned to the window, where the curtains hung slightly askew and parted, then to reveal the broken latch. The entry was forced, yes, but with care. The glass is shattered, but the frame is intact, as though the intruder knew precisely where to strike. I felt a stir of unease at his words. You suspect the burglary was staged? I asked. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar light that heralded the unraveling of a mystery. I suspect, Watson, that we are dealing with a mind that seeks to mislead. The footprints outside 3 sets, yet one is lighter, less certain. The glasses 3 poured, yet one untouched. The rope a sailor's not a thief's. These are not the marks of a random crime. Hopkins, standing by the table, looked troubled. But the Randall gang, Mr. Holmes, they are known for such boldness. 3 men, striking at night, taking what they can carry. It fits their pattern. Holmes's gaze was sharp. Patterns are made to be broken, Hopkins. The Randall gang may be bold, but they are not subtle. This crime bears the mark of calculation, not chaos. He crossed to the hearth, where the bloodstain marked the stone, and crouched once more. The blow was delivered with force, but not frenzy. The poker is heavy, yet manageable. A woman of strength, or a man of average build, could wield it. With deadly effect, Hopkins started. A woman, surely you don't suspect Lady Brackenstall? Holmes rose, brushing the dust from his knees. I suspect no one, Hopkins, until the facts compel me. But I observe, and what I observe suggests a deeper truth. Let us see the grounds once more. The lake may hold answers the house conceals. We stepped out into the biting cold, the snow crunching beneath our boots as we followed the trail of footprints to the frozen lake. The tracks, as Holmes had noted, were 3 in number, but the lightest set seemed to falter, as though their owner had paused or turned back. At the lake's edge, the snow was disturbed, and Holmes knelt, his lens sweeping over the ground. Here, said he, pointing to a patch of ice, the tracks end. The ice is cracked, but not broken through. If they crossed, they did so with care, or not at all. He rose and scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing. The pearl earring, we found its presence here is no accident. It is a clue, but not to the Randall gang. We must learn its owner and why it was left behind. As we returned to the house, Holmes's mood was one of quiet intensity. The Abbey Grange is a stage, Watson, he murmured, and we have seen but the first act. Lady Brackenstall's tale is a thread in a larger tapestry, and I mean to unravel it. We shall speak with the maid, Teresa, again, and then to the village. There are players in this drama yet to be revealed. The manor loomed behind us, its windows dark against the snow, and I felt a chill that had little to do with the winter air. The Abbey Grange held its secrets close, but Sherlock Holmes was a man who could wrest truth from shadow, and I knew that the mystery of Sir Eustace's death was far from solved. Chapter 4. The Grounds and the Clutha. Winter air bit at our faces as we stepped from the oppressive grandeur of the Abbey Grange into the stark, snow-laden grounds. The sky hung heavy with the threat of further snow, its grey expanse unbroken, save for the occasional dart of a rook across the horizon. The manor loomed behind us, its stone walls silent witnesses to the tragedy within. And I, Dr. John H. Watson, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon me. Sherlock Holmes, however, moved with the purposeful grace of a hunter, his eyes scanning the frozen landscape as if it were a manuscript to be deciphered. Inspector Stanley Hopkins followed, his breath clouding in the chill, his expression a mixture of determination and unease. The footprints we had noted earlier led from the dining room window, their outlines stark against the snow. Holmes knelt at once, his lens glinting as he studied the impressions with meticulous care. 3 sets, as we observed, said he, his voice low but resonant with focus. 2 are deep, made by men of substantial build, their strides confident and direct. The 3rd is light and narrower, less certain, as though the maker hesitated or bore less weight. He traced a finger along the edge of the lighter track, his brow furrowed. This is no youth, Watson, but a man of slighter frame. Or perhaps one burdened by indecision. I peered over his shoulder, noting the faint irregularity in the lighter prints. Could it be an accomplice less committed to the crime? I ventured. Holmes's lips twitched in a faint, enigmatic smile. A possibility, Watson, but hesitation. In a burglar is a rare creature. These tracks tell a story, and I suspect it is not the one we are meant to read. He rose and followed the trail, his long coat sweeping the snow as he moved with deliberate steps toward the frozen lake that marked the boundary of the estate. The lake lay like a sheet of clouded glass, its surface dusted with snow and scored by the wind. The footprints converged here, their clarity muddled by a patch of disturbed snow near the edge. Holmes crouched again, his lens sweeping over the ground, and his hand darted forward to retrieve a small object half buried in the drift. It was the pearl earring we had found earlier, its luster undimmed by the cold, a delicate thing that seemed out of place in the harsh landscape. He held it to the light, turning it slowly between his fingers. "This," said he, "is no trinket of a common thief. The pearl is of fine quality, set in gold with a craftsman's touch. It speaks of wealth, of refinement hardly the spoil of a gang like the Randalls." Hopkins, standing nearby, seized upon the find with a spark of enthusiasm. It must belong to Lady Brackenstall then. Perhaps torn from her in the struggle. Holmes's gaze was sharp, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps," said he, slipping the earring into his pocket. "But pearls do not fall so easily, Hopkins, nor do they lie so conveniently in the snow. We shall see what its owner has to say." He turned his attention to the lake, his eyes narrowing as he studied the ice. "The tracks end here," he observed, pointing to a series of cracks radiating from the disturbed snow. "The ice is thin, but not broken through. If the intruders crossed, they did so with care, or else they turned back. Yet there is something else." He moved along the edge, his lens trained on the snow, and paused at a faint mark, barely discernible. "A scuff, Watson, as though someone slipped or dragged their foot. The lighter track is here, but it does not continue beyond." Hopkins frowned, his hands thrust deep into his coat pockets. "You think one of them fell, or that they doubled back to confuse us?" Holmes did not answer at once, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the lake met a copse of bare trees. "Confusion is their aim, Hopkins, but not in the way you suppose. The Randall gang, if they were here, would leave a trail of chaos, not subtlety. These tracks are a performance, staged for our benefit." We followed the trail back toward the house, Holmes pausing occasionally to examine the snow for further clues. At the base of a yew tree, half hidden by its drooping branches, he found a cigarette end, its paper yellowed but intact. He lifted it with care, sniffing it briefly before tucking it away. "Virginia tobacco," said he, "not the coarse blend of a common ruffian, but something finer. Our intruders, if intruders they were, have curious tastes." I felt a stir of unease at his words. "You doubt the burglary entirely, Holmes?" I asked. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with the fire of the chase. "I doubt the simplicity of it, Watson. A burglary is a blunt instrument smash, a window, seize the loot, and flee. This crime is a tapestry, woven with care to conceal its true pattern. The earring, the cigarette, the knots in the rope all are threads that lead us elsewhere." Hopkins, trailing behind, looked increasingly perplexed. "But the silver, Mr. Holmes, the candlestick and plate are gone. That's the Randall gang's mark, plain as day." Holmes's smile was thin. Silver is easily taken, Hopkins, and easily missed. It is the perfect distraction for a mind that wishes us to look no further. Let us return to the house. There are questions yet to be asked. We re-entered the Abbey Grange through a side door, the cold clinging to our coats as we stepped into a narrow passage leading to the servants' quarters. Holmes requested to see the groundskeeper, a grizzled man named Barnett, whose weathered face and calloused hands spoke of years spent battling the elements. He stood before us, cap in hand, his eyes wary but steady. "You were on the grounds last night?" Holmes asked, his tone conversational yet piercing. "Aye, sir," Barnett replied. "I made my rounds at 10, as always. The house was quiet, though I saw a light in the dining room. Sir Eustace was up late, as he often was. And you saw no strangers?" Holmes pressed. "No figures lurking near the lake or the windows?" Barnett shook his head. "None, sir. The snow was fresh, and I'd have seen tracks if anyone had passed. I checked the gates before bed locked tight. They were." Holmes nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And the lake, do you cross it when it freezes?" "Not this year, sir," Barnett said. "The ice is too thin. A man would be a fool too. Try it." Holmes thanked him and dismissed him, his fingers drumming lightly against his thigh as we made our way back to the dining room. "The grounds are as much a part of this puzzle as the house, Watson," said he. "The earring, the cigarette, the faltering tracks, they point to a presence that does not fit the tale of a burglary." Hopkins, growing impatient, interjected. "But what does it mean, Mr. Holmes? If not the Randall gang, then who?" Holmes's gaze was distant, as though seeing beyond the walls of the Abbey Grange. "It means, Hopkins, that we must look to those within the house as well as without. The earring is a woman's, the knot a sailor's, the cigarette a gentleman's. These are not the marks of a gang, but of individuals with motives we have yet to uncover." As we stood once more in the dining room, Holmes paused by the table, his eyes lingering on the 3 glasses. "This room," said he, "is a stage, and the props have been arranged with care. The wine, the rope, the poker-all are meant to tell a story. But the true story lies in what was not meant to be seen." He turned to Hopkins, his voice firm. "I suggest you have your men search the village for any strangers, particularly a man with knowledge of the sea. The knot is no accident, and it may lead us to the heart of this affair." The Abbey Grange seemed to close in around us, its shadows deepening as the day waned. Holmes's words echoed in my mind, and I felt the stirrings of a truth that lay just beyond our grasp. The grounds had yielded their clue, but the mystery of Sir Eustace's death remained. A riddle wrapped in frost and deception, waiting for Sherlock Holmes to unravel its secrets. Chapter 5. The testimony of the maid at Abbey Grange, with its brooding stone walls and frost-laden windows, seemed to hold its breath as we re-entered its shadowed halls. The January cold seeped through the very bones of the manor, and the air carried a heaviness that spoke of secrets yet unvoiced. Sherlock Holmes, his lean figure moving with the quiet intensity of a man on the scent. Lead Inspector Stanley Hopkins and me, Dr. John H. Watson, back into the heart of the house. The dining room, with its grim relics of murder, the blood-stained poker, the half-empty bottle of claret. The 3 glasses lay behind us, but its mysteries followed like a spectre. Our purpose now was to speak with Teresa, Lady Brackenstall's maid, whose loyalty and sharp eyes might hold the key to truths concealed by the polished veneer of the household. We were shown to a small parlour off the servants' quarters, a room sparely furnished but warmed by a modest fire that crackled in the grate. The walls were plain, adorned only with a single faded print of a pastoral scene, and the narrow window offered a view of the snow-covered grounds, where the lake gleamed dully under the grey sky. Teresa awaited us, standing by the hearth, her wiry frame taut with a mixture of deference and defiance. She was a woman of middle years, her face lined with the marks of long service, her dark eyes sharp and unyielding. Her hands, clasped before her, were steady, but there was a tightness in her jaw that betrayed her unease. Holmes seated himself, his manner calm but his gaze piercing, as though he could see through flesh to the thoughts beneath. "Teresa," said he, his voice low and deliberate, "you have served Lady Brackenstall for many years, I understand. Your loyalty does you credit, but it is truth we seek today, and I trust you will speak plainly." She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll tell what I know, sir," she said, her voice steady but tinged with a faint Irish lilt. "It's a terrible thing that's happened, and I want justice for my lady as much as anyone." Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Begin with last night. Tell us what you saw and heard, from the moment you retired until you found Lady Brackenstall bound in the dining room." Teresa's eyes flickered to the fire, as if seeking strength in its glow. "I went to my room at 10, sir, after seeing to my lady's needs. The house was quiet, though I knew Sir Eustace was still up, drinking in the dining room. He was often like that, restless, angry, especially when the wine took hold. I heard raised voices his and my lady's around 11, but I didn't go down. It wasn't my place, and such quarrels were not uncommon." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "The nature of the quarrel, what did you overhear?" She hesitated, her hands tightening. "It was hard to make out, sir, through the walls. But Sir Eustace was shouting something about money, I think, and my lady's voice was sharp, as if she was defending herself. It didn't last long. By midnight, all was still. And then," Holmes prompted, his tone gentle but insistent. "I was roused by a cry," she continued, faint, like it came from below. "I thought it might be my lady, so I hurried down. I found her in the dining room, bound to the chair, her face bruised and her eyes wild with fear. Sir Eustace lay by the hearth, blood pooling beneath him. I cut her free with a kitchen knife and sent for the constable. That's all I saw." Sir Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. "You cut the rope yourself, you say. Did you notice its texture, or how it was tied?" Teresa frowned, as if the question puzzled her. "It was coarse, sir, like the bell-pull cord. The knots were tight hard to undo. I didn't think much of it, only that I had to free my lady." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "And Lady Brackenstall, she speak of the intruders. She said 3 men broke in," Teresa replied. "Masked, rough sorts, who struck Sir Eustace and tied her up. She was shaken, sir, but she held herself together, as she always does." Holmes leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. "You speak of Lady Brackenstall with great affection. Has she often needed such resilience?" Teresa's eyes flashed, a spark of protectiveness breaking through her reserve. "She's a gentle soul, sir, too good for this house. Sir Eustace was a hard man, cruel when the mood took him. I've seen marks on her before, bruises on her arms and wrists, though she'd never complain. He was not a husband to be proud of." I felt a pang of sympathy for Lady Brackenstall, and even Hopkins, standing by the door, seemed moved, his face softening. Holmes, however, remained impassive, his mind sifting through her words like a miner panning for gold. "Did you see anyone else that night?" he asked. A stranger, perhaps, or someone unexpected near the house. Teresa shook her head. No, sir. The grounds were empty when I made my rounds earlier. The snow was untouched, save for Barnett's tracks from his patrol. Holmes rose, his movements fluid and purposeful. Thank you, Teresa. Your account is most helpful. We may speak again before we leave. As we stepped back into the passage, Holmes's expression was one of quiet calculation. The maid is loyal, he murmured, but loyalty can blind as well as bind. Her story confirms Lady Brackenstall's, yet it adds a layer Sir Eustace's cruelty. The quarrel, the timing. These are not mere details, Watson. Hopkins, trailing behind, looked skeptical. She seems straightforward, Mr. Holmes. Her devotion to her mistress is natural, given Sir Eustace's reputation. Holmes's smile was thin. Natural, perhaps, but devotion can shape truth as surely as deceit. The quarrel Teresa overheard is a thread we must follow. A man like Sir Eustace, drunk and belligerent, may have enemies closer than the Randall gang. We returned briefly to the dining room, where Holmes paused by the table, his eyes lingering on the 3 glasses. The wine, said he, is a curious touch. Teresa confirms the intruders poured it, yet 1 glass remains untouched. Why stage such a detail, if not to mislead? I frowned, struggling to keep pace with his reasoning. You think the glasses are a ruse? I think, said Holmes, that this crime is a performance, and we are its audience. The rope, the glasses, the earring all, are props in a carefully crafted scene. Teresa's testimony, while truthful in part, omits something perhaps. Unknowingly, perhaps not. Hopkins shifted uncomfortably. But the Randall gang, Mr. Holmes, their methods match. 3 men, a violent entry, stolen silver. Why look beyond them? Holmes's gaze was sharp, almost impatient. Because, Hopkins, the Randall gang are blunt instruments, not artists. This crime bears the mark of subtlety, sailor's knot, a pearl earring, a cigarette of fine tobacco. These are not their tools. We stepped out once more into the grounds, the cold biting at our faces as Holmes led us back to the lake. He knelt by the cracked ice, his lens sweeping over the snow where the footprints ended. Teresa's account of the grounds being empty is telling, said he. If no strangers were seen, how did our intruders arrive? The snow would betray any approach, yet Barnett saw only his own tracks. I felt a chill that was not entirely from the wind. You suspect someone within the house? I asked. Holmes rose, his eyes gleaming with the fire of discovery. I suspect, Watson, that the Abbey Grange is a house of secrets, and Teresa, loyal though she is, may guard more than she reveals. We must look to the village next. A man who smokes Virginia tobacco and ties sailors' knots is no phantom. He exists, and he is near. As we turned back toward the manor, its dark silhouette loomed against the fading light, a fortress of stone and silence. Teresa's testimony had added a piece to the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete, a web of truth and deception that only Sherlock Holmes could hope to untangle. The Abbey Grange held its secrets close, but the game was afoot, and I knew that the truth, however elusive, could not long evade my friend's relentless pursuit. Chapter 6. The Puzzle of the Glasses. The Abbey Grange, with its austere stone walls and frost-rimed windows, seemed to close in around us as we returned to the dining room, where the grim relics of the previous night's tragedy awaited. The January light, weak and fleeting, filtered through the heavy curtains. casting a pallid glow over the scene that had become the heart of this perplexing mystery. The blood-stained poker, the frayed rope, and, most intriguing of all, the 3 wineglasses, stood as silent sentinels, each holding a fragment of the truth that Sherlock Holmes was determined to uncover. I, Dr. John H. Watson, felt the weight of the case pressing upon me, a tangle of clues that seemed to defy resolution, while Inspector Stanley Hopkins bore the frustrated air of a man whose instincts warred with the evidence before him. Holmes, however, was in his element, his lean figure moving with a quiet intensity as he approached the oak table where the glasses stood. The bottle of claret, its contents diminished by half, gleamed dully in the dim light, flanked by the 3 glasses, their rims stained with the faint residue of wine. He lifted the first glass, holding it to the light with the care of a jeweler. Examining a gem, "Observe, Watson," said he, his voice low and precise. "This glass bears the marks of lips clear, distinct, as though the drinker savoured the wine. The second is similar, though the stain is fainter, suggesting a hastier sip." He turned to the 3rd glass, his eyes narrowing as he tilted it against the light. "But this," he continued, "is different. The wine was poured, yet the rim is pristine, untouched by any mouth. Why, in the midst of a violent crime, would 3 glasses be poured, but only 2 drunk?" Hopkins, standing by the hearth, frowned, his hands clasped behind his back. Perhaps one of the intruders was interrupted. "Mr. Holmes, the Randall gang is bold, but even they might have been startled by a noise or the fear of discovery." Holmes's smile was thin, almost impatient. Interrupted Hopkins. "A gang of thieves, having bludgeoned a man and bound his wife, pauses to pour wine, only to leave 1 glass untouched. It is incongruous, a detail too deliberate to be accidental." He set the glass down with care and turned to the bottle, lifting it to examine the label. "A Chateau Margaux, 1888, of fine vintage, not the sort one expects burglars to linger over. The cork is fresh, the bottle opened recently, yet the amount consumed is curiously modest for 3 men." I felt a stir of excitement at his words, though their full import eluded me. "You think the wine is part of a deception?" I asked. Holmes's gaze met mine, sharp and penetrating. "I think, Watson, that this scene is a tableau arranged to tell a story that is not wholly true. The glasses are a puzzle, and their solution lies not in what they show, but in what they conceal." He moved to the chair where Lady Brackenstall had been found, the coarse rope still dangling from its arms. He lifted a length of it, his fingers tracing the sailors, not with a faint nod of recognition. "This, too, is part of the tableau, not tied with skill, not haste, a sailor's hand, not a thief's." Hopkins shifted uncomfortably, his faith in the Randall gang's guilt visibly shaken. "But the silver, Mr. Holmes, the candlestick and plate are gone. That's their mark, plain as day." Holmes's eyes gleamed with a spark of challenge. "Silver is easily taken, Hopkins, and easily missed. It is the perfect prop for a burglary, but I suspect it is not the heart of this crime." He crossed to the window, where the broken latch and shattered glass testified to the intruder's entry. The window was forced, yes, but with care. The damage is precise, not the work of a clumsy thief. And the footprints outside 3 sets, yet one falters, as though its maker hesitated or turned back. He turned to face us, his expression one of quiet determination. The glasses, the rope, the footprints, the pearl earring all point to a narrative crafted with intent. The Randall gang may be convenient scapegoats, but their methods are crude, their motives simple. This crime bears the mark of a mind that plans, that conceals. Hopkins rubbed his chin, his brow furrowed. You're suggesting someone else, Mr. Holmes, a single mind behind it all. Holmes did not answer directly, but instead paced the room, his eyes sweeping over every detail, the portraits on the walls, the heavy curtains, the polished floor now marred by faint traces of blood. Let us test the wine itself, said he abruptly, retrieving a small vial from his pocket. He poured a drop from the bottle into the vial, adding a pinch of powder from another container. The liquid fizzed faintly, and Holmes nodded. No. Poison, at least. The wine is as it seems, fine claret, untouched by malice. But its presence here is a question we must answer. I watched, fascinated, as he continued his examination, his movements swift and methodical. What does it mean, Holmes? I asked. Why pour 3 glasses if not to drink? Holmes paused, his fingers resting lightly on the table. It means, Watson, that the number 3 is significant not because 3 men drank, but because we are meant to believe 3 men were here. The untouched glass is a lie, a detail meant to mislead. Someone wished to create the illusion of a trio, yet only to partook. Hopkins, growing restless, interjected. But Lady Brackenstall saw 3 men, Mr. Holmes. She described them rough, striking without mercy. Holmes's gaze was sharp. Lady Brackenstall saw what she was meant to see, Hopkins, or what she wishes us to believe she saw. Her account is too precise, too aligned with the scene before us. Truth is rarely so tidy. We stepped out into the hall, where the air was colder, the shadows deeper. Holmes's mind was clearly racing, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. We must look beyond the house, said he. The cigarette end we found by the yew tree Virginia tobacco, a gentleman's choice. The pearl earring, a lady's adornment. The sailor's knot, a seafarer's skill. These are not the marks of a gang, but of individuals with motives we have yet to discern. Hopkins nodded, though his expression betrayed uncertainty. I'll have my men search the village for any strangers, as you suggested. A sailor, perhaps. Or someone with fine tobacco. Do so, Holmes replied. But look also for connections to this house. Sir Eustace was a man of enemies, by all accounts. His temper, his cruel Notorious's testimony hints at a household under strain. We must learn who stood to gain from his death, and who might wish to hide behind the shadow of the Randall. Gang. As we prepared to leave the dining room, Holmes paused once more by the glasses, his eyes lingering on their silent testimony. The puzzle of the glasses is the key, Watson, he murmured. They tell us not what happened, but what someone wishes us to believe happened. We shall follow this thread, and it will lead us to the truth. The Abbey Grange seemed to watch us as we departed, its dark windows like eyes that guarded its secrets. The puzzle of the glasses had deepened the mystery, but Holmes's relentless pursuit of the truth was a beacon in the fog of deception. The game was afoot, and I knew that the answers, however elusive, could not long evade his grasp. Chapter 7. A visit to the village. The winter sun, pale and unyielding, hung low in the sky as we left the brooding confines of the Abbey Grange and set out for the village of Chislehurst. The snow-crusted lanes stretched before us, flanked by hedges brittle with frost, and the air was sharp with the scent of pine and frozen earth. Sherlock Holmes, his long coat billowing in the chill wind, strode with the purposeful gait of a man whose mind was already unraveling the threads of the mystery. I, Dr. John H. Watson, followed closely, my thoughts a tumult of the clues we had gathered, the sailor's knot, the pearl earring, the cigarette end, and the enigma of the 3 glasses, one untouched. Inspector Stanley Hopkins brought up the rear, his face etched with the strain of a case that seemed to slip further from his grasp with each new revelation. The village of Chislehurst lay a mile from the Abbey Grange. A cluster of stone cottages and timbered shops huddled around a small green, where a frozen pond gleamed under the weak light. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional crunch of boots on snow and the distant bark of a dog. The villagers, bundled against the cold, cast curious glances as we passed, their faces betraying the unease that news of Sir Eustace Brackenstall's murder had brought to their close-knit community. Holmes's eyes, keen and restless, swept over the scene, noting every detail: the smoke curling from chimneys, the tracks of carts in the snow, the faded sign of the Green Man swinging gently in the breeze. "Our inquiries begin here," said Holmes, his voice low but resonant with purpose. "The Abbey Grange is a fortress of secrets, but the village is its mirror. If a stranger pass through, or if whispers of Sir Eustace's enemies linger, we shall find them here." We made our way to the Green Man, a low-beamed inn at the heart of the village, its windows aglow with the promise of warmth. The landlord, a stout man named Pritchard, with a florid face and a wary demeanour, greeted us at the bar. His eyes widened at the sight of Hopkins's official bearing, but he nodded respectfully when Holmes introduced himself. "Mr. Holmes, is it?" said Pritchard, wiping his hands on a cloth. Word spread about the trouble at the Grange. A bad business, that Sir Eustace was no saint, but to be struck down in his own home, 'tis a grim thing. Holmes leaned against the bar, his manner casual but his gaze piercing. "Indeed, Mr. Pritchard, we seek information about any strangers in the village. These past days, 3 men, perhaps, rough in manner, or a single figure who might stand out, a man with a sailor's bearing, perhaps, or one fond of fine tobacco." Pritchard's brow furrowed as he considered the question. "3 men, you say? There was a trio last week, rough sorts, passing through. They drank here one evening, spoke of work in London thieves, I reckoned, but they paid their bill and left no trouble. As for a sailor, there's been one about, a tall fellow, bronzed from the sun. He came in a few nights ago, kept to himself, smoked a cigarette or 2. Didn't say much, but he asked after the Grange, casual-like." Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. "This sailor described him, if you please. Tall, broad, with a weathered look," Pritchard replied. "Dark hair, a scar above his left brow. He wore a peacoat, like them navy men, and his hands were rough, like he'd hauled ropes aplenty. Said his name was Croker, or something close." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, and I felt a thrill of anticipation. The sailors, not the cigarette end the pieces were beginning to align. "Did this Croker mention his business in Chislehurst?" Holmes asked. Pritchard shook his head. "Not a word, sir. He drank his ale, smoked his cigarette, and left. Haven't seen him since, though I heard he's lodging at Mrs. Turner's boarding house, down by the church." Holmes nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the bar. "And Sir Eustace, did he frequent the village? Were there those who bore him ill will?" Pritchard's face darkened. "Sir Eustace wasn't one for mixing with us folk. Kept to the Grange, mostly, though he'd come to the market now and then. He had a sharp tongue, and his temper was known. Some said he cheated men in business tenants, mostly, who worked his lands. There's no love lost for him here, but I'd not say anyone wished him dead. Holmes thanked the landlord and led us back into the cold, his expression one of quiet calculation. "A sailor named Croker," he murmured, with a scar and a taste for Virginia tobacco. "The knot, the cigarette tower threads, are weaving together, Watson." We proceeded to Mrs. Turner's boarding house, a modest dwelling with a sagging roof and a garden buried under snow. Mrs. Turner, a widow with a sharp eye and a sharper tongue, confirmed Pritchard's account. "Jack Croker's his name," she said, her arms crossed as she stood in the doorway. "Took a room 3 days ago. Quiet man, keeps to himself. Said he's just back from sea, looking for work. He was out late last night, didn't come in till after midnight, and his boots were wet with snow." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Did he speak of the Abbey Grange, or of Lady Brackenstall?" Mrs. Turner's eyes narrowed. "Not by name, sir, but he asked if the big house on the hill was still owned by the Brackenstalls. Said he'd known them years ago, before he went to sea. I thought it odd, but he didn't press the matter." Holmes thanked her and turned away, his mind clearly racing. "Croker is our man," said he as we walked back toward the village green. "A sailor recently returned, with a connection to the Grange. The knot, the cigarette, the timing, it all points to him." Hopkins, who had been silent, spoke up, his voice tinged with skepticism. "But what motive, Mr. Holmes? If Croker's not part of the Randall gang, why would he kill Sir Eustace?" Holmes's smile was enigmatic. "Motive, Hopkins, is the shadow cast by action. We have the action, the knot, the earring, the glasses. The motive will reveal itself. When we find Croker." We paused at the green, where a group of villagers had gathered, whispering among themselves. Holmes's presence, it seemed, had not gone unnoticed, and the air was thick with speculation. A blacksmith, burly and soot-stained, approached us, his face grim. "You're here about the Grange, aren't you?" he said. "Sir Eustace was a hard man, drove my brother off his land with threats and debts. If you're looking for enemies, you'll find plenty in Chislehurst." Holmes listened, his expression neutral. "Did any speak of violence against him?" he asked. The blacksmith shook his head. "Talk, aye, but no more. Folk here grumble, but they don't kill." Holmes nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Thank you, my good man. Your candor is appreciated." As we made our way back to the four-wheeler, Holmes's mood was one of quiet intensity. "The village has given us a name, Watson," said he. "Jack Croker, a sailor with a past tied to the Grange. The knot, the cigarette, the earring, they are his fingerprints, though whether he is murderer or pawn remains to be seen." Hopkins, still grappling with the shift in focus, frowned. "But the Randall gang, Mr. Holmes, their mark is clear. The stolen silver." The 3 men Holmes cut him off with a raised hand. "The Randall gang is a convenient spectre, Hopkins. But spectres do not smoke Virginia tobacco or tie sailors' knots. Croker is our key, and we must find him before he slips away." The village of Chislehurst faded behind us as we returned to the Abbey Grange, the snow crunching beneath our wheels. The mystery was deepening, each clue a thread in a tapestry that grew ever more intricate. Jack Croker, a sailor with a shadowed past, loomed large in my thoughts, and I knew that Holmes's relentless pursuit would soon bring us face to face with the truth, or with the man who held it. Chapter 8. The sailor's tale. The village of Chislehurst had yielded its secrets grudgingly, like the frost that clung to its lanes, but the name of Jack Croker, a sailor with a shadowed connection to the Abbey Grange, had ignited a spark in Sherlock Holmes's relentless pursuit of truth. The winter afternoon was waning, the sky a dull slate above the snow-draped Kentish countryside. As our four-wheeler rattled back toward the manor, Holmes sat in silence, his sharp features etched with the intensity of a mind weaving together the threads of the mystery, the sailor's knot, the pearl earring, the cigarette end, and the untouched glass of claret. I, Dr. John H. Watson, felt the weight of anticipation, sensing that we were drawing closer to the heart of the affair. Inspector Stanley Hopkins, though still tethered to his belief in the Randall gang, followed Holmes's lead with a mixture of deference and doubt. Our inquiries in the village had pointed us to Mrs. Turner's boarding house, where Croker lodged, and Holmes, with his characteristic decisiveness, directed the driver to take us there directly. The house stood at the edge of Chislehurst, a modest structure with a sagging roof and windows that seemed to squint against the cold. Mrs. Turner, the sharp-tongued widow, met us at the door, her eyes narrowing as she recognized us. "You're back about Croker, I reckon," she said, her arms crossed. "He's in his room, but he's not one for visitors. Keeps to himself, that one." Holmes's smile was disarming, though his eyes gleamed with purpose. "We shall not detain him long, Mrs. Turner. A few questions, and we'll be on our way." She led us up a creaking staircase to a small room under the eaves, its single window frosted over and its air heavy with the scent of tobacco and sea salt. Jack Croker stood as we entered, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a bronzed complexion and a scar above his left brow that caught the dim light. His dark hair was swept back, and his peacoat, patched but clean, hung loosely about him. His eyes, a piercing blue, held a wariness that bordered on defiance. But there was a frankness in his bearing that suggested a man unafraid to face the truth, whatever it might be. "Mr. Croker," Holmes began, his voice calm but edged with authority, "I am Sherlock Holmes, and these are Dr. Watson and Inspector Hopkins of Scotland Yard. We are investigating the murder of Sir Eustace Brackenstall at the Abbey Grange. Your name has come to our attention, and I would hear your account of your movements last night." Croker's jaw tightened, but he met Holmes's gaze steadily. "I've nothing to hide, Mr. Holmes," said he, his voice low and resonant, with a trace of a coastal accent. "I was at the Green Man till near midnight, drinking with a few locals. After that, I walked back here. The snow was falling, and I saw no one on the lanes." Holmes leaned against the doorframe, his fingers steepled. "A simple tale, Mr. Croker, but let us test its edges. You asked about the Abbey Grange at the inn, I understand." "Why?" Croker hesitated, his eyes flickering to the window as if seeking escape in the snow beyond. "I knew the Brackenstalls years ago," he said at last, "before I went to sea. Mary Lady Brackenstall, that is, was a friend, back in Australia. I heard she'd married and come to England, and when I returned last month, I wanted to know how she fared." Holmes's gaze sharpened, though his tone remained even. "A friend, you say? And did you know Sir Eustace?" Croker's hands clenched at his sides, a shadow crossing his face. "I knew of him, a brute, by all accounts. I heard whispers in the village how he treated her, the shouting, the bruises. It wasn't right, a woman like Mary enduring that." Holmes reached into his pocket and produced the pearl earring, holding it up to the light. "This was found near the lake at the Abbey Grange," said he. "Do you recognize it?" Croker's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition passing over his features before he masked it. "It's a pearl," he said gruffly. "Could belong to anyone." Holmes's smile was faint but piercing. "Not anyone, Mr. Croker. This is a lady's earring, and you have a connection to a lady at the Grange. Let us speak plainly. Were you there last night?" Croker's face hardened, but his voice remained steady. "I told you, I was at the inn. Ask Pritchard, he'll vouch for me. I didn't set foot near the Grange." Holmes stepped closer, his eyes boring into Croker's. "And yet, Mr. Croker, a sailor's not bound Lady Brackenstall to her Cherry-Clove hitch, tied with skill. A cigarette end, Virginia tobacco, was found by a yew tree on the grounds. You smoke such tobacco, do you not?" Croker's hand twitched, as if resisting the urge to reach for his pocket. "Plenty of men smoke Virginia," he said, "and knots. I've been at sea 10 years. Every sailor knows a clove hitch. You're fishing, Mr. Holmes, and I'm no catch." Holmes's expression was unreadable, but I sensed the quiet thrill of the chase in his posture. "Fishing, perhaps, but the waters are clear. Your alibi is thin, Mr. Croker. The inn closed at 11, yet you returned here after midnight, your boots wet with snow. The Grange is but a mile away, and you have a history with Lady Brackenstall. Speak the truth, and it may go easier for you." Croker's eyes blazed, but he held his ground. "I've told you all I know. I wasn't at the Grange, and I didn't kill Sir Eustace. If you've more questions, ask them, but I'm done dancing around your hints." Holmes nodded, as if satisfied, though I knew his mind was far from settled. "Very well, Mr. Croker. We shall leave you for now, but I advise you to remain in Chislehurst. The truth has a way of surfacing, and I intend to find it." As we descended the creaking stairs, Hopkins spoke, his voice low with frustration. "He's hiding something, Mr. Holmes. His story doesn't hold too many gaps." Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. "Gaps, Hopkins, are where the truth hides. Croker is no fool, he knows more than he says, but he is not our murderer. His defiance is that of a man protecting something or someone." We stepped out into the cold, the snow crunching beneath our boots as we made our way back to the four-wheeler. The village lay quiet, its secrets buried beneath the frost, but Croker's tale had added a new layer to the mystery. "The earring," I said, breaking the silence. He recognized it, Holmes. I saw it in his eyes. Holmes nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Indeed, Watson. The earring is Lady Brackenstall's, I am certain, and Croker's connection. To her is no mere friendship. The sailor's knot, the cigarette, his presence near the Grange all point to his involvement, but not as a killer. He is a piece of the puzzle, but the picture is not yet clear." Hopkins, still clinging to his theory, frowned. "If not Croker, then the Randall gang, Mr. Holmes. The stolen silver, the 3 men it fits their pattern." Holmes's eyes gleamed with a spark of impatience. "Patterns are made to be broken, Hopkins. The Randall gang is a shadow, cast to obscure the truth. Croker's tale, incomplete though it is, points us closer to the heart of this affair. We must return to the Grange and confront Lady Brackenstall with what we know." As we climbed into the four-wheeler, the Abbey Grange loomed in my thoughts, its dark windows hiding a truth that was beginning to take shape. Jack Croker's story, with its half-truths and silences, had brought us closer to the mysteries. Core, but the path ahead remained shrouded in frost and deception. Holmes's relentless pursuit, however, was a beacon in the gloom, and I knew that the sailor's tale was but a chapter in the unfolding drama of the Abbey Grange. Chapter 9. The confrontation. The winter twilight had settled over the Abbey Grange, casting long shadows across its snow-draped grounds as our four-wheeler returned us to the manor's imposing façade. The air was sharp with the promise of fresh snow, and the silence of the Kentish countryside was broken only by the crunch of wheels and the distant cry of a fox. Sherlock Holmes sat motionless, his sharp features etched with the quiet intensity of a man poised on the cusp of revelation. I, Dr. John H. Watson, felt a growing anticipation. The threads of the mystery, the sailor's knot, the pearl earring, the cigarette end, and the untouched glass of claret drawing tighter with each step we took toward the truth. Inspector Stanley Hopkins, though still tethered to his belief in the Randall gang, followed Holmes with a deference born of necessity, his earlier certainty shaken by the sailor's tale. The manor loomed before us, its grey stone walls a fortress of secrets, its windows dark, save for the faint glow from the drawing room where Lady Mary Brackenstall awaited. Holmes had insisted on a private audience with her, his resolve hardened by Jack Croker's guarded admissions and the clues that pointed to a deeper truth. As we entered the hall, the maid Teresa met us, her face pale and her eyes wary, but she led us without protest to the drawing room, where the fire cast a warm but fleeting light over the opulent furnishings. Lady Brackenstall rose as we entered, her auburn hair catching the firelight, her delicate features marred by the livid bruise that still marked her cheek. Her green eyes, though steady, held a flicker of apprehension, and her hands, clasped tightly before her, betrayed a tension she could not wholly conceal. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice low but composed, "I had not expected your return so soon. Have you news of the villains who did this?" Holmes seated himself opposite her, his manner calm but his gaze piercing, as if he could see through the veil of her words to the truth beneath. "We have made progress, Lady said he, his voice measured, "but it is not of villains I wish to speak, but of truth. There are discrepancies in this affair that demand clarity, and I believe you hold the key." Her eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her composure. "I have told you all I know, Mr. Holmes. 3 men broke in, struck my husband, and bound me. I can add nothing more." Holmes reached into his pocket and produced the pearl earring, holding it up so that it gleamed in the firelight. "This was found near the lake," said he, his tone gentle but unrelenting. "It is yours, is it not?" Her breath caught, and for a moment her composure faltered, her fingers tightening in her lap. I may have lost an earring," she said faintly, "but in the struggle so much was confused. It could have fallen then." Holmes's eyes never left her face. "The struggle, Lady Brackenstall, is a curious thing. The rope that bound you was tied with a sailor's knot, a clove hitch, expertly done. The glasses on the table, 3 poured, yet 1 untouched. A cigarette end, Virginia tobacco, found by a yew tree. And now this earring, dropped not in the dining room, but by the lake, where the footprints falter. These are not the marks of a random burglary, but of a carefully crafted scene." Her lips parted, but no words came. Holmes leaned forward, his voice softening, though its edge remained. "I know of Jack Croker, Lady Brackenstall, a sailor, recently returned, who knew you in Australia before your marriage. He was in last night, his boots wet with snow, and he asked after you at the Green Man. Speak the truth, madam. It will serve you better than silence." Her eyes filled with tears, and her hands trembled as she pressed them to her face. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "You are too clever, Mr. Holmes. I cannot hide from you. Yes, the earring is mine. And yes, Jack Croker was here, but not as you think." Hopkins, standing by the door, started forward, his face a mask of shock. "You confess to conspiracy, Lady Brackenstall. This man Croker killed your husband." She shook her head vehemently, her tears spilling over. "No, Inspector, it was not murder, not as you mean it. Let me tell you, and judge me as you will." Holmes nodded, his expression one of quiet encouragement. "Go on, madame, the truth in all its parts." She drew a shuddering breath, her eyes fixed on the fire as if it could anchor her. "Sir Eustace was a cruel man, Mr. Holmes. You have heard it from Teresa, from the village, his temper, his violence. Last night, he was drunk, raging over some imagined slight. He struck me, as he had before, and I fled to the dining room to escape him. Jack Meister Croker had come to see me, in secret. He had heard of my husband's cruelty and wished to know. I was safe. He entered through the window, as he had done once before, to avoid the servant." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "Sir Eustace followed me, saw Jack, and flew into a rage. He seized the poker from the hearth and struck. At him, Jack defended himself, and in the struggle, Sir Eustace fell, his head striking the hearth. It was an accident, Mr. Holmes, I swear it. Jack did not mean to kill him." Holmes's gaze was steady, his fingers steepled. "And the scene, the rope, the glasses, the stolen silver." She bowed her head. "My doing, Mr. Holmes. I panicked. I knew Jack would hang if the truth came out. I told him to flee, and I staged the burglary. I cut the rope from the bell pull, tied myself to the chair Jack showed me the knot years ago in Australia. I poured the wine, 3 glasses, to suggest intruders, and took the candlestick and plate to make it seem a theft. The earring must have fallen when I went to the window to call after Jack. I thought to protect him, to protect us both." Hopkins, his face flushed with indignation, stepped forward. "This is a confession, Lady Brackenstall. You and Croker conspired to cover a murder." Holmes raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Not murder, Hopkins, but manslaughter at most. Sir Eustace's cruelty is well documented. Teresa's testimony, the village whispers, the bruises on Lady Brackenstall's arms. Croker acted in defense, and Lady Brackenstall's deception was born of fear, not malice." Her tears fell freely now, and she looked at Holmes with a mixture of gratitude and despair. "What will you do, Mr. Holmes? I cannot bear for Jack to suffer for this." Holmes rose, his expression grave but not unkind. "The truth is mine. To uncover, madame, not to wield as a weapon. I must speak with Croker again, but I promise you this: justice, not vengeance, is my aim." As we left the drawing room, the weight of her confession settled over us. Hopkins was visibly torn, his duty as an officer warring with the human tragedy before him. "What now, Mr. Holmes?" he asked. "Do we arrest her?" Croker Holmes's eyes were distant, fixed on some inner calculation. "Not yet, Hopkins. The sailor's tale must be tested, and the balance of justice weighed. The Abbey Grange has yielded its secret, but its resolution lies ahead." The manor's shadows seemed to deepen as we stepped into the hall, the fire's warmth fading behind us. Lady Brackenstall's confession had laid bare the heart of the mystery, but the path to justice was fraught with moral ambiguity. Holmes's resolve, however, was a beacon in the gathering dusk, and I knew that the confrontation had set us on a course toward the truth, whatever its cost. Chapter 10. The moral dilemma. The twilight had deepened into a bitter dusk as we left the Abbey Grange. The the snow-laden grounds stretching away into the gloom like a canvas of unresolved truths. The confession of Lady Mary Brackenstall had cast a new light upon the grim affair, transforming the stark tableau of murder into a tragedy of desperation and defense. Sherlock Holmes, his lean figure silhouetted against the fading glow of the manor's windows, was silent as we climbed into the four-wheeler, his mind no doubt wrestling with the implications of her words. I, Dr. John H. Watson, felt a heavy knot in my chest, torn between sympathy for a woman driven to deceit by fear and the cold demands of justice. Inspector Stanley Hopkins, his face a mask of conflicted duty, sat opposite, his hands clenched as if to anchor his resolve. The carriage rattled through the frozen lanes of the silence within broken only by the creak of wheels and the muffled snort of the horses. At length, Holmes spoke, his voice low and measured, as though weighing each word. "We stand at a crossroads, gentlemen," said he, his eyes fixed on the passing hedgerow. "The law demands that Jack Croker face trial for the death of Sir Eustace Brackenstall. Yet the truth we have uncovered paints a different picture. Man defending a woman from a tyrant. A woman shielding her protector with a desperate lie." Hopkins stirred, his brow furrowed with unease. "The law is clear, Mr. Holmes. Lady Brackenstall admitted to staging the scene, cutting the rope, pouring the wine, hiding the silver. That's conspiracy, and Croker's blow, accidental or not, ended a man's life. We cannot let them walk free." Holmes's gaze was sharp, though not unkind. "The law, Hopkins, is a blunt instrument, ill-suited to the nuances of human suffering. Sir Eustace was no innocent victim. Teresa's testimony, the village whispers, the bruises on Lady Brackenstall's arms all attest to his cruelty. Croker's act was not murder, but a reflex born of necessity. To condemn him is to punish a man for protecting another from harm." I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of the dilemma. "But what of Lady Brackenstall's deception?" I asked. "She misled us, staged a burglary to shield Croker. The law will not look kindly on that." Holmes's lips curved in a faint, wistful smile. "The law, Watson, sees only the act, not the heart behind it. Lady Brackenstall acted out of fear for Croker's life, for her own future in a house ruled by a brute. Her deception was a shield, not a sword. To expose her would be to destroy a woman already broken by years of torment." Hopkins leaned forward, his voice tense. "You propose to let them go, Mr. Holmes? To turn a blind eye to a crime? I'm a man of the yard. I cannot condone that." Holmes's eyes gleamed with a spark of challenge. "I propose nothing yet, Hopkins. But consider this. The Randall gang, whom you so eagerly pursue, are a convenient shadow. Their reputation for violence fits the scene, yet the clue's the sailor's knot, the pearl earring, the Virginia tobacco point elsewhere. To chase them is to chase a phantom, while the true actors in this drama stand before us, their motives laid bare." We reached Chislehurst station, where the cold bit deeper, and the platform was nearly deserted, save for a lone porter sweeping snow from the boards. Holmes alighted and paced, his breath clouding in the chill air, his mind clearly racing. "We must see Croker again," said he. His tale was guarded, but Lady Brackenstall's confession changes the game. He must know the truth is out, and we must hear his full account. We made our way back to Mrs. Turner's boarding house, where the widow greeted us with a scowl, but led us to Croker's room without protest. The sailor stood as we entered, his bronzed face taut with defiance, his blue eyes wary but resolute. The scar above his brow seemed to pulse in the dim light of the single lamp, and his hands, rough from years at sea, were steady as he faced us. Double quotes, Mr. Croker, Holmes began, his tone calm but unyielding. Lady Brackenstall has spoken. She has told us of your presence at the Abbey Grange last night, of the struggle with Sir Eustace, of her attempt to shield you with a staged burglary. The time for half-truths is past. Speak plainly and let us weigh the truth. Croker's jaw clenched, but his gaze did not waver. So Mary told you, he said, his voice low and rough. I didn't want her to carry that burden, but she's braver than I deserve. I was there. I went to see her, to know she was safe. I'd heard of Sir Eustace's cruelty. Her letters, years ago, hinted at it, and the village talk confirmed it. I climbed through the dining room window, as I'd done once before in secret. She was there, bruised and shaken from his latest rage. Then he came in, drunk, waving that poker like a madman. He saw me, called me names, and swung at me. I grabbed his arm, we struggled, and he fell, hit his head on the hearth. I didn't mean to kill him, Mr. Holmes, I swear it. Holmes's eyes narrowed, searching Croker's face for any trace of deceit. And the cena, rope, the glasses, the silver. Mary's doing, Croker said, his voice heavy with guilt. She told me to run, said she'd make it look like a burglary. I didn't want to leave her, but she insisted. She cut the rope, poured the wine, hid the silver. The earring, she didn't know it fell when she leaned out the window to call after me. Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. You love her, do you not? Croker's eyes softened, a flicker of pain crossing his face. Always have. Since Australia. But she married him, and I went to sea. I only came back to be sure she wasn't suffering. I never meant for this. Holmes turned to Hopkins, who stood rigid, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. You have heard it. Hopkins, said Holmes, a man defending a woman protecting her saviour. The law would see them both in the dock, but justice is not so blind. What say you? Hopkins's hands clenched, his voice tight. I don't like it, Mr. Holmes. A man is dead, and they lied to cover it. But I've seen the bruises on her, heard the village talk. Sir Eustace was a brute. I'd not see a woman like that punished for his sins. Holmes's gaze was steady, almost solemn. Then we are agreed. Croker, you must leave England tonight, if possible. The antipodes are far, and a man of your skills can find a new life there. Lady Brackenstall will be safe, her secret guarded, provided you vanish from these shores. Croker nodded, his shoulders sagging with relief. I'll go, Mr. Holmes. For her sake, I'll go. Holmes turned to me, his eyes searching. And you, Watson, you are the conscience of this enterprise. What is your verdict? I hesitated, my heart torn between duty and compassion. Sir Eustace was a tyrant. I said at last. Croker acted to protect, not to kill. Lady Brackenstall's lie was born of fear, not malice. I cannot condemn them for it. Holmes's smile was faint but warm. Then it is settled. Hopkins, you may pursue the Randall gang, but I wager they'll elude you, as phantoms do. The official report will note their involvement, and the case will close with no further arrests. As we left the boarding house, the snow began to fall, soft and silent, cloaking the village in a veil of white. The moral dilemma had been resolved, not by the rigid hand of the law, but by the subtler scales of justice that Holmes alone could balance. The Abbey Grange, with its dark secrets, receded into the night, and I knew that this chapter of our adventure, though fraught with ambiguity, had found its end in mercy. Chapter 11. The Resolution. The snow fell steadily as we departed Chislehurst, blanketing the village in a hush that seemed to seal the secrets of the Abbey Grange within its silent folds. The moral weight of our decision to shield Jack Croker and Lady Mary Brackenstall from the law's unyielding grasps settled over us like the frost upon the carriage windows. Sherlock Holmes sat in quiet contemplation, his sharp profile softened by the dim light, his eyes fixed on some distant point. Beyond the swirling flakes, I, Dr. John H. Watson, felt a curious blend of relief and unease. The scales of justice balanced by compassion, yet shadowed by the knowledge that we had stepped beyond the law's strict boundaries. Inspector Stanley Hopkins, his face still taut, with the conflict of duty and mercy, sat opposite, his silence a testament to the gravity of our choice. The four-wheeler rattled toward the station, the crunch of snow under its wheels a steady rhythm in the stillness. Holmes broke the silence. At last, his voice low but resolute. "The affair of the Abbey Grange is concluded, gentlemen, not in the courts, but in the quieter chambers of justice. Croker will sail for Australia before dawn, and Lady Brackenstall will carry her secret in silence. The Randall gang, convenient as they are, will bear the blame in the official record, though I suspect they will remain as elusive as the wind." Hopkins stirred, his hands clasped tightly. "It sits ill with me, Mr. Holmes," he said, his tone heavy. "I'm a man of the yard, sworn to uphold the law. Yet I cannot deny the truth of it, sir. Eustace was a brute, and his death, though tragic, was no murder in cold blood. Still, to let Croker walk free, to let Lady Brackenstall's deception stand." Holmes's gaze was steady, almost solemn. "The law, Hopkins, is a framework, not a soul. It cannot weigh the heart of a woman driven to desperation, nor the instinct of a man protecting one he loves. Croker's act was not malice, but necessity. Lady Brackenstall's lie was not deceit, but survival. To drag them before a jury would serve no justice, only punishment." I nodded, my thoughts drifting to the bruised face of Lady Brackenstall, the fierce loyalty of Teresa, the haunted eyes of Jack Croker. "It's a hard choice, Holmes," I said, "but I believe it's the right one. Sir Eustace's cruelty left scars deeper than the law can see. To punish those who suffered under him feels like adding injury to injury." Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile, though his eyes remained distant. "Well said, Watson. You have the heart of a physician, ever seeking to heal rather than wound. Our task now is to ensure the resolution holds to protect those who cannot protect themselves." We reached the station, where a train awaited to carry us back to London. Before parting, Holmes drew Hopkins aside, his voice low and commanding. "Your report, Hopkins, must point to the Randall gang. The footprints, the stolen silver, the broken window, these will suffice for Scotland Yard's records. Let it be known that the intruders fled across the lake, where the ice may have given way beneath one, explaining the faltering tracks. The case will close, and the Grange will fade from the public eye." Hopkins hesitated, his jaw tight, but at last he nodded. "I'll do it, Mr. Holmes, though it goes against my grain. I trust your judgment, and I've seen enough of Sir Eustace's ways to know there's truth in what you say. But if the Randall gang is caught, and they prove innocent of this," Holmes's eyes gleamed with a spark of irony, "then they will have escaped justice for other crimes, Hopkins, and the world will be none the worse." The gang is a phantom in this affair, and phantoms do not confess. We boarded the train, the carriage nearly empty save for a wary-looking clerk hunched over a newspaper. As the train pulled away, Chislehurst vanished into the snow, and with it the Abbey Grange, its dark silhouette, a memory of secrets unveiled. Holmes leaned back, lighting his pipe, the smoke curling upward like a wisp of thought. "The resolution of a case, Watson," said he, "is not always in the arrest, but in the understanding. We have seen the heart of this tragedy, a woman bound by fear, a man bound by love, a death born of desperation. The law would crush them, but we have chosen a different path." I watched the snow blur past the window, my mind heavy with the day's events. "Do you think Croker will keep his word, Holmes? To leave England, to start anew?" Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his expression unreadable. "He will, Watson, for her sake if not his own. Love is a powerful chain, stronger than any forged by the law. He will sail tonight, and Lady Brackenstall will find peace, however fragile." The train rattled on, carrying us back to the familiar chaos of London, where the gaslights would soon pierce the winter gloom. The Abbey Grange affair had ended, not with the clang of prison bars, but with a quiet act of mercy, a resolution that left no record save in our own consciences. Holmes's decision, though unorthodox, was a testament to his singular ability to see beyond the letter of the law to the human truths it often obscured. As the snow fell outside, I felt a quiet certainty that justice, in its truest form, had been served. Chapter 12. A quiet return. The train bore us back to London through a world swathed in snow, the Kentish countryside fading into the dusk like a memory half forgotten. The carriage was a cocoon of silence, its dim interior lit only by the faint glow of a single lamp, swaying with the rhythm of the rails. Sherlock Holmes sat opposite me, his lean figure slumped against the seat, his eyes half closed but gleaming with the residual fire of a mind that never truly rested. I, Dr. John H. Watson, felt the weight of the Abbey Grange affair settle over me, a blend of relief and disquiet. The resolution we had forged sparing Jack Croker and Lady Mary Brackenstall from the law's unyielding grasp had been a triumph of compassion over convention, yet it left a lingering question in my heart. Had we truly served justice, or merely bent it to our will? The snow fell in soft, relentless flakes beyond the window, cloaking the world in a quiet that seemed to echo our own. Inspector Stanley Hopkins had remained in Chislehurst, tasked with filing a report that would lay the blame at the feet of the elusive Randall gang, a fiction that would satisfy Scotland Yard while shielding the truth. Holmes, ever the architect of such delicate balances, seemed untroubled, his pipe unlit but clutched in his hand as if it were a talisman of thought. At length, I broke the silence, my voice low against the hum of the train. "Holmes, are you certain we've done right by Croker and Lady Brackenstall? The law would see them in the dock, and we've taken it upon ourselves to judge their fates." Holmes's eyes opened fully, their grey depths piercing in the dim light. "Justice, Watson, is not a monolith carved by statute," said he, his tone measured but firm. "It is a living thing, shaped by the truths we uncover. Sir Eustace Brackenstall was a tyrant, his cruelty a poison that tainted all within his reach. Croker's act was no murder, but a desperate defense. Lady Brackenstall's deception was no crime, but a shield for a man who risked all for her. To deliver them to the gallows would serve only the letter of the law, not its spirit." I nodded, though my heart was not wholly eased. "It's a risk, Holmes," I said. If Croker does not sail, or if Hopkins's report is questioned, the truth may yet come out. Holmes's lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. Croker will sail, Watson. Love is a chain stronger than iron, and his devotion to Lady Brackenstall will carry him to the antipodes. As for Hopkins, he is a man of duty, but not without heart. His report will stand, and the Randall gang will remain a convenient shadow, ever out of reach. The train rattled on, the lights of London beginning to glimmer through the snow-fogged windows. I thought of Lady Brackenstall, her bruised face and haunted eyes, and of Croker, his bronzed features etched with loyalty and regret. Their lives, intertwined by a moment of violence, had been spared by Holmes's singular judgment, a judgment that saw beyond the crime to the human souls at its core. And what of us, Holmes? I asked. We carry this secret now. Does it not weigh upon you? He turned to me, his expression softening, a rare glimpse of the man beneath the machine. Every case leaves its mark, Watson, said he. But this one, perhaps, is lighter than most. We have spared 2 souls from ruin, and in doing so, we have righted a wrong that the law could not. The Abbey Grange will fade into obscurity, its tragedy buried beneath the snow. Our burden is to carry the truth in silence, and I find it no heavier than the many we have borne before. The train slowed as we approached Baker Street, the familiar outline of the city emerging through the dusk. The snow continued to fall, a quiet curtain drawn over the day's events, and I felt a sense of closure, however fragile. The Abbey Grange affair had been no ordinary case. It had tested not only Holmes's intellect, but his humanity, revealing a depth of compassion I had seldom seen in him. As we stepped onto the platform, the cold air stung my face, but my heart was warmed by the knowledge that we had chosen mercy over judgment. We returned to 2-1B, where the fire in our sitting room roared with a welcoming warmth. Mrs. Hudson, ever the silent guardian of our sanctuary, greeted us with tea and a knowing look. Sensing perhaps that our day had been one of uncommon trials, Holmes sank into his armchair, lighting his pipe at last, the smoke curling upward like a prayer for absolution. The game is over, Watson, said he, his voice soft but resolute. The Abbey Grange has told its tale, and we have written its ending. Let us rest now, for tomorrow will bring new mysteries, and we must be ready. I nodded, settling into my own chair, the weight of the day lifting in the familiar comfort of our lodgings. The snow fell outside, a quiet shroud over London, and the Abbey Grange receded into memory, its secrets safe with us. The adventure had ended, not with the clang of justice, but with the gentle silence of a truth understood, a resolution as quiet as our return. The end.